what is this all about? We are talking about information technology. Why do we hear words like information-rich, knowledge-based, technology-driven economy? What should it mean to us?
Well, ultimately, the goal is not necessarily all these technical terms. The goal is what all these mean to the lives of people. What, in many ways nowadays, is called meaningful connectivity. We, especially in, say, urban areas in Accra and so on, we take so many things for granted now. You're able to reach out, you're able to call people, they're able to reach you, you're able to do transactions on your phone, you have a smartphone and all that. This is not a reality for everyone in our country. And it's for these reasons why Ghana Investment Fund for Electronic Communications, Gifec, was set up. I know you called us Giftel, but that's the very beginning. We've since moved on to being called Gifec, and I can explain how that came about. And we were set up to make sure that everyone in the country essentially has meaningful connectivity, such as you and I have, and pretty much take for granted.
But the telcos tell us that subscriptions are on the rise, and the numbers are very high. One network has 20 plus million subscribers. Some have double of that. Some are reaching a triple of that number. So how are we not meaningfully connected if the telcos are recording all these numbers of subscribers? Where's the disconnect?
There's a gap from the standpoint of geography. Because certainly Ghana is not Accra and Accra is not Ghana, and so on. So when you go to some of the places that Gifec roams and where our work is, you mentioned unserved and underserved communities, you will see that not everyone has all these millions or they are part of these subscriptions. And even if you have a SIM card, you need to be able to have the network to access it. You need to be able to afford it. You need to be able to also have the equipment to utilize it. Some people, when they call me, sometimes I could tell that the phone they're using is probably a knockoff, because every few minutes you say, I can't hear you. And sometimes it's not even the network, it's the device they're using. It's not built to standard. So meaningful connectivity has to do with not just having say a subscription, but having the ability to afford, having the ability to connect to the network, and then having the right devices and so on and so forth. And Gifec is set up to make sure that all these gaps, as much as possible, are closed, so everyone is able to really participate in the digitalization, which we all know is really the future, is the now and the future as well.
So talk to us about what Gifec does. What's the mandate? Because you've talked about, the quality of the phone they are using. We don't produce phones. They are usually largely imported. People buy them from elsewhere. The networks, the telcos, have their own way of monitoring these things. What's your mandate in relation to all of this?
So our mandate is to make sure that we work in collaboration with the key stakeholders in the industry. And then we manage a universal access fund, which was set up all the way from 2004. And to ensure that there's universal access and universal service. What do all these things mean? For us, it means the three programs that we pursue. We have to pursue a connectivity programs. We call it Rural Connectivity Program. And then we have what we call the Cyber Labs program, which has a lot more to do with devices with which people can access the networks. And then finally, we have the ICT capacity building program, which ensures that as much as possible, people have the knowledge to utilize the access or the equipment, which are all part of the digitalization. So those are the three main programs that Gifec pursues. So and of course, we are mandated to make sure that we deal with the unserved and underserved communities. So when it comes to unserved or underserved communities, it's not just a matter of geography. Of course, that is part in some cases where people are located has a lot to do with the kinds of accesses they have. But sometimes it also has to do with the background of these people. So it's both from a subpopulation standpoint or class standpoint, and it also has to do with the location. So these are the two main things that constitute what we call unserved or underserved communities. So as an example, somebody could be right here in Accra, but is coming from a certain background, which gets in the way of even being able to sometimes get the network access they need. Something that if perhaps you're in airport residential, you may not have to worry about. In some places, they may have to worry about it right here in Accra even. And then in other cases, the person may be in Accra, but they happen to be from a certain subpopulation where they are not getting the education they need, or in some cases it's just cultural. For example, we've identified that some of the females at times don't get as engaged in the whole IT area as their male counterparts.
Why is that?
Well, as I mentioned, some of these are social-cultural, right? So there's a culture that tends to say that women, IT is for males, and that, you just don't have the numbers that you have for the males.
So do you have a gender target in this ICT capacity building?
Absolutely. So
thing that you do?
Yes, especially under the minister, the current minister, who is the first female minister of the ministry. We've targeted female capacity building at any point in time. So we're doing so much more. Most of our programs are biased that way for a reason, because there's a gap which we're trying to close. So you may have heard about a Girls in ICT program. It's the first of its kind. It started in 2012, and it's an ITU program. That's the International Telecommunications Union. So the ITU came up with, in 2012, the Girls in ICT. When it started, it was pretty much a day's celebration, to encourage females to get into the ICTs. Since this minister came aboard in 2017, the program has been expanded. So now we look at it as a full training. We even build labs for some of the trainees. We give them equipment and so on, so that they go beyond just a day celebration to actually do more in ICT.
Where do you get the monies from? You mentioned a universal access fund. How are you funded?
We're funded from contributions from the telcos. Okay. It's a 1% revenue that they need to pay to us.
So talk to us about internet penetration. You've mentioned a number of times Accra is not Ghana, and the experiences that you get in some parts are not the experiences that you get elsewhere. So how does Gifec help in, making sure that this gap is closer or is closed up entirely? So penetration, as we mentioned, we're busy making sure that we have network connectivity across the country. So our rural connectivity program is geared towards that. Up until 2017 or so, Gifec will typically build mass in these areas. It will build about 20 on average. That's how we used to be. Under this government, that has moved now to about 250 a year. Okay, so we're doing about 20 every year until recently. Now we're doing about 250 of these to really accelerate the whole digitalization, because, we realize that for Ghana to really move to the next level, the whole digitalization has to move at a much faster rate. And that's the connection between ICT and economic growth?
Absolutely, because it's been shown that ICT really impacts GDP at a very, very high level. So that one is not really in dispute. What is in dispute is to what extent is the government going to commit to doing more. So I mentioned that we get the 1% revenue. That's true. But once you get this revenue, we realize that if we're just going to use this, excuse me, if we're just going to use this organic revenue that we get from the telcos, that rate was going to be too slow to include so many people. So government came up with a Ghana Rural Telephony and Digital Inclusion Project. And that was, it started in 2020. And this project is building 2016 sites across the country. And that's why we're now moving at a much faster rate.
Do you have any events coming up that you would want to tell us about? And your final words before we rise.
As for events, we're not, ours is not just events. We do programs. So we have programs that we execute all the time. So these are systematic programs that we're executing. We just did a Girls in ICT program in Savannah region. It trained 1,000 girls and 100 teachers. We have another one coming up in Northern region very soon.
How can people participate in your programs? How can they reach you so that you can give them extra information?
We move region to region. So we work with Ghana Education Service to select the people.
Right. Prince, thank you
for
being with us
today.
Thank
you very much.
Prince of Osu Sefa is the administrator of the Ghana Investment Fund for Electronic Communications, Gifec. He's been talking to us about their programs, and so you know what efforts are going into ensuring that ICT education is more widespread. The connection between ICT and economic growth is digitalization, and it's the link that the Gifec people think will make us better, will take us to the next level. Digitalization is the way to go. Thank you for joining us for this conversation on tech. We'll be moving on to the lighter side of the table very shortly, but not before we wish a happy 14th birthday to Daniela, Hannah, Nafi, Jomo Wellington, also to Karen, Nadodua Wellington, and Richard Niboni Mills Thompson. Happy birthday shouts to you all, and more birthday shouts going to Jaden Manuel Elikem Kuma. You are 2 today from your parents, Pastor Philip and Mrs. Kuma, and your uncle, Pastor Alan Daro Tego. Happy birthday to all of you, and happy birthday to all of us who were born in May, because we are special. Okay, we'll be back with the arts side, the lifestyle segment of the show, and we'll wrap it all up with Vanilla. He's